Benjamin Netanyahu is out to dodge a corruption case against him. Having blamed the Israeli media and judges there for putting him on trial, he is now asking another politician, the country's president, to keep him out of jail. There is a myth still making the rounds in American political circles that Israel's PR problem has more to do with TikTok than the genocide it's inflicted on Gaza.
And what they were being told on social media was not just one-sided, it was pure propaganda.
Plus, South Korea, and a political influencer who the military police had their eyes on, who's still doing his thing. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made a move last week that took some real chutzpah. Another way to describe it would be shameless. He has asked President Yitzhak Herzog for a pardon over corruption charges laid against him going back to 2019. That is after repeatedly telling Israeli journalists that he would do no such thing, insisting that he would clear his name in court. And Netanyahu is asking for a preemptive pardon with no admission of guilt, which, if Herzog grants it, would be unprecedented for an Israeli politician. The Prime Minister has long described the case against him as a witch hunt, led by the media and the judiciary. So, if he succeeds in sidestepping the courts, Israeli journalists and judges will wonder what he might have in store for them. Israelis will go to the polls next year, and Netanyahu's name will be on the ballot. A pardon would tidy up his political resume domestically. Internationally, however, he still faces war crimes charges at the International Criminal Court, an historic legal case that not nearly enough people in Israel are talking about. Benjamin Netanyahu is saying that now is the time for healing what ails Israel. He's not talking about the genocide in Gaza, the indictment for war crimes he faces at the International Criminal Court, or the descent of Israel, its status as a pariah state. He was referring to the pardon he has requested from Israel's president, Yitzhak Herzog, for the corruption charges Israeli prosecutors brought against him 6 years ago, charges that Netanyahu says have created a rift in Israeli society.
שסיום מיידי של המשפט יסייע רבות להנמיך את הלהבות ולקדם פיוס רחב שהמדינה שלנו כל כך זקוקה לו.
A pardon that time and time again he has said he did not need nor want.
אם תיבחר, האם תנסה לקדם חוק או מהלך כלשהו שימנע את העמדתך לדין?
מה? מה פתאום? התשובה היא לא.
אולי גם אתה רגוע כי בן גביר מתכנן לעצור את המשפט שלך?
אין דבר כזה. אני שמעתי בתקשורת שאומרים שאני רוצה להתחמק מהמשפט. אני רוצה להתחמק? איזה הבל הבלים.
The change of tune came last month, the day after Donald Trump called for that pardon.
What is your reaction to that, and would you accept a pardon if it were to be offered to you?
Well, look, I'll think about it, but I'm very grateful.
You've seen the sequence of this theater. Trump, in October, came to the Israeli Knesset. He looked at the president and he said,
Mr. President, why don't you give him a pardon?
And you could see the president kind of chuckling. And you got the sense, wait a minute, is this more serious than just a quip? And then Netanyahu officially asked for a pardon. You see this whole theater and you think, wait, there is a logic here.
For Netanyahu's home base, reality has changed. The American president is with us. The nation needs me. And if the lie is big enough, more people will believe it. You have an American president who is telling us there is peace in the Middle East. If people are willing to buy that, they're certainly willing to buy what Netanyahu is selling around his court case.
Netanyahu's attempt to frame his pardon request as in a public interest is one of the most staggering cases of hypocrisy I've seen in modern politics. The reason why there's a rift in Israel is because Netanyahu began agitating against the entire legal system, the police and the courts, the Supreme Court, insisting everything was a cabal to bring down a patriotic prime minister. And now he's saying, well, the rift will go away if you let me off the hook.
This is the same prime minister who in 2023 triggered mass protests when he tried to reform Israel's justice system, by weakening the Supreme Court and giving more power to the government. Those protests went on for months before the reforms were shelved. Netanyahu has always characterized the corruption cases against him as a witch hunt that he blames on the media and the judiciary. A pardon from President Herzog, whether merited or not, will help him make that case to the Israeli public. And despite Netanyahu's scapegoating of Israeli journalists for the charges that prosecutors laid against him, there are still news outlets that back him on that. But then they've grown accustomed to doing the Prime Minister's bidding.
There is Channel 14, which is basically a mouthpiece of Netanyahu, in which his biggest supporters sit and defend him and say that everyone is just out to get him.
אני חושב שמי שהכי מתפלל שהחנינה הזאת תתקבל, זו הפרקליטות. אין לי ספק בכלל, הם יצאו הכי נקיים מהסיפור הזה, כי הפרקליטות היא פה זאת שתפרה את כל התיקים האלה.
This is a media that has been enlisting itself willfully to the Israeli genocidal attack on Gaza. So to talk about it as independent media is a facade anyway. The vast majority of Jewish Israelis only care about the facade of democracy, about having a legal system that they feel basically works for them. And this is the internal debate to which Netanyahu is playing.
The media in Israel faces the same challenge that the media faces in any country where you have a government that seeks to be authoritarian while being elected, and a government that lies so consistently. For the media to call out the lies then starts to appear like they're a political player, but if they don't call out the lies, they are enabling the liar to proceed. And oftentimes the public ends up concluding that everyone's a liar. No one's figured out how to deal with this. Not in Israel, not in America, not in any other countries that have come under the spell of such a leader.
Israeli news outlets should have a particular interest in this case, since some of the corruption charges against Benjamin Netanyahu pertain directly to the media. The evidence includes a recording of the Prime Minister on a call with Arnon Moses, the editor of the newspaper Yediat Achronot, offering to pass legislation that would harm a competing paper, Israel Hayom, in exchange for more favorable coverage from Moses's paper. As for the timing of his pardon request, Netanyahu knows that within a year he will have to face an election. Plus, he has a so-called ceasefire in place. So he needs to strike while the iron, the news cycle, is still hot. That may be why his Justice Minister, Yariv Levin, recently put judicial reform back on the agenda, which means it could soon be open season on the judiciary, as well as the Fourth Estate.
On this matter of judicial overhaul or reform, there has been a lot of resistance from the media, including media that hadn't really criticized Israel's actions in Gaza. And as a response, Netanyahu has really started an attack on the media, which is really from the playbook of the far right. We see that in Trump, we see that with Bolsonaro, we see that with Orban. All the populist right-wing leaders, when they try to protect themselves, they start an attack on the liberal media.
Netanyahu sees this move in electoral terms as something of a win-win. If the president grants the preemptive pardon, obvious win for Netanyahu. If not, Netanyahu can play a line. It's the old elites. They're all against me. They're against you, my supporters. They're against you, the soldiers who were out there in the field. They're against the country. They're trying to take us in the wrong direction. It's an argument that works well.
The president has a problem because if he does the pardon without a forming of a certain national consensus on the matter, there won't be an agreement on the matter. He can go and say, a bit like Netanyahu was saying, I want to unite the nation, stop the divisive issues. Netanyahu's critics are saying, you've torn it apart, so now you are talking to us about uniting. We know it's about you.
As for the Israeli media, fearing for their future freedom, most news outlets surrendered that through their cheerleading of the genocide in Gaza. Israeli political analysts have long theorized that one of the reasons Benjamin Netanyahu prolonged the assault on the Strip was to keep himself in power, to better shield himself from the legal charges. The media institutions that supposedly hold power to account in Israel not only allowed that to happen, most of them endorsed it, kept calling for Palestinian blood in a country that keeps calling itself a democracy.
The really tragic element of it, and really that puts all of us, all Israeli citizens, to shame, is that in our name, genocide has been conducted for the mere cause of displacing attention from a trial of a politician. And there was so little opposition to it. And the fixation on the debate on whether or not Netanyahu should be pardoned, with zero interest about any kind of resolution that would end genocide, that would end 70 years plus of oppression, is just astounding.
What Netanyahu will feel is that having manufactured consent for a genocide through social and media outlets, is he really not capable of manufacturing consent now for a pardon? Because that old liberal Zionist elite actually has no counter-narrative. All they are is anti-Bibi. They're not pro-international law. They're not anti-genocide. So it may be surprising that if he does get the pardon, how little of an uprising there is in a society that went on the journey to a Gaza genocide with him as their leader.
Back to Israel Hayom, the newspaper founded and bankrolled by the Adelsons, longtime American backers of Benjamin Netanyahu. The paper just hosted a media conference in New York City where one of the guests provided an assessment, a questionable one, on why support for Israel has plunged in the U.S. Ryan Coles has been on that story.
If you listen to Hillary Clinton explain it, the reason younger Americans overwhelmingly side with Palestinians over Israel is not the scale of destruction in Gaza, the bombing of hospitals, schools, and refugee camps. She blames TikTok.
That is where they were learning about what happened on October 7th, what happened in the days, weeks, and months to follow. That's a serious problem. It's a serious problem for democracy, whether it's Israel or the United States, and it's a serious problem for our young people.
Most of Clinton's speech at the conference zeroed in on social media and how Israel's public image is being shaped and, in her view, distorted by what people see online.
They did not know history. They had very little context. And what they were being told on social media was not just one-sided, it was pure propaganda.
Scroll through TikTok and you'll find footage filmed by Palestinians of bombed-out neighborhoods and videos posted by Israeli soldiers and settlers. Clips that rarely make it onto mainstream news reports, but still reach millions of young viewers. Even Benjamin Netanyahu has declared social media to be the most important weapon in the battle for public opinion and support for Israel.
We have to fight with the weapons that apply to the battlefields in which we're engaged. And the most important ones are social media.
So it's no coincidence that TikTok is being bought out. Among the reported buyers is the billionaire owner of Oracle, Larry Ellison, a well-known backer of Israel. But is TikTok really the threat U.S. elites think it is? Or is it just a mirror, and Washington doesn't like the reflection?
Thanks, Ryan. 1 year ago this week, on the night of December 3rd, politics in South Korea was in a state of upheaval when the then president declared martial law. There is a new president now who was an opposition leader at the time, Lee Jae-myung. Another figure who has surged in prominence is Kim Ou-Joon, an outspoken, controversial voice who leans to the left ideologically and made his name through the media, not the mainstream side. Kim left that space years ago and now heads the country's biggest YouTube-based news network, primarily through his political podcast. Kim is part journalist, part activist, part political performer. On the night that martial law was declared, he was the sole media figure the South Korean military tried to arrest, and since then he has only grown in influence. The Listening Post's Meenakshi Ravi now on Kim Ou-Joon and what he and others like him reveal about the world of politics and media in South Korea.
Let's begin with that standoff in South Korea, which began with the late night
모든 언론과 출판은 계엄사의 통제를 받는다.
All media in South Korea are coming under the control of martial law. Are banned under threat of arrest, and the media was censored according to martial law.
인터넷에서 뉴스를 검색하고 있었던 것 같아요. I was on the internet checking the news. Then someone called and said, "You have to turn on the TV right now." It must have been about a minute after martial law was declared.
비상계엄을 선포합니다.
Shortly after that, I started getting calls from all over. I was told, they're coming to get you, so run.
널 잡으러 가니 빨리 도망가라는 얘기였어요.
The night of 3rd December 2024 was pure chaos in South Korea. Martial law had been imposed swiftly and suddenly. And outside the offices of Kim Ou-Joon, armed troops gathered with orders to imprison him. In a list of targets that included leading politicians and high-ranking bureaucrats, Kim was the only media person marked for arrest.
Kim Ou-Joon was singled out during the martial law because of his political influence and because he had a lot of progressive followers. So it was as if taking the leader of the progressives to take down resistance. The fact that Kim Ou-Joon was considered a threat to Yoon Suk-yeol, the conservative administration, I think that really shows how media persona is becoming more of a political force in Korea.
There are definitely a lot of players who have risen in significance, who have benefited directly from the political polarization that has spiked in South Korea over the past decade or so. And as a result, many YouTubers have come up and their views have also surged. Kim Ou-Joon's influence and high profile essentially also made him a target of the Yoon administration during martial law as they attempted to arrest him. Also, in the aftermath of martial law, he certainly became a pivotal figure in bringing out more information about what happened in those few hours.
비상계엄 해제 결의하고 해제가 다 되고 난 이후에도 공간 앞에 있었다는.
Kim Ou-Joon is a media maverick. His career of nearly 3 decades has spanned radio, television, publishing, and the online space. He has moved from medium to medium, platform to platform, with the determined agility of a man intent on staying relevant and being heard. During South Korea's decade of back-to-back conservative governments that started in 2008, Kim's political criticism was sharp, satirical, and unapologetically oppositional.
그래서 저는 이 외교 안보 라인이 정말 등신에 가깝다. 등신 라인이다.
Kim rose to prominence as the host of a rush-hour radio program in Seoul called News Factory. It aired on the Traffic Broadcasting System, TBS, and was the city's top-rated show for almost all of its 6-year run until 2022. Kim's influence, incessant swearing, at times libelous rants, and liberal bias eventually had repercussions. When the Conservatives returned to power under the presidency of Yoon Suk-yeol, the man who would eventually try to impose martial law, TBS, which relied heavily on public funding, saw its budget slashed, and Kim and his program, News Factory, were forced off the air. As it turned out, this was a gear shift moment for Kim. He launched his YouTube channel in January 2023, and his audience not only followed him, it multiplied. Kim's YouTube channel is called Gyomsonen Himderda. Gyomson means modesty or humility, and the name translates roughly to humility is hard, and it fits Kim's persona perfectly. He is irreverent and unfiltered. His online network now sits in the top ranks of South Korea's media. In his view, it's a necessary corrective in a landscape dominated by conservative players.
아주 오랜 시간 동안
For a very long time, our media environment has been monopolized by the conservatives. And now they talk about polarization. What polarization? For there to be polarization, there must be 2 poles. But all this time, there was only one side, one pole, dominating the media. So when people say there is a polarization, that actually means balance has been restored, because the other side has finally appeared, and both poles are fighting it out, at last.
이제야.
Kim Ou-Joon has been one of the most listened to pundits in South Korean politics for quite a few years now. And his style is one that really pushes boundaries and essentially makes big claims, catering more to progressive audiences. And in doing so, quite often he is willing to really take things to extremes, often focusing more on delivering opinions, not always backing it up with factual evidence, and even occasionally verging on conspiracy theories.
그 카르텔에 균열을 내겠다. 편파적으로. 그러나 그 편파에 이르는 과정은 공정할 것이다.
Kim Ou-Joon's relationship with conspiracies is something he's given a lot of thought to.
Until it is proven, every hypothesis is a conspiracy. But when you are dealing with power, you can't wait until everything is proven before you raise issues, because they can conceal or distort facts to their advantage. I'm not at all embarrassed to be called a conspiracy theorist.
부끄럽지 않다는 거죠.
Unverified claims, rumors, and anonymous tip-offs are central to Kim's political output, and his record is mixed. One of the most outrageous conspiracies he pushed was an alleged assassination plot against a conservative politician. It proved to be false. But another claim that a Supreme Court judge was possibly biased against the current president is now at the center of an ongoing audit of that judge's conduct. Amidst the political turmoil in South Korea, Kim has seemingly become a kingmaker for the Liberal Democratic Party. In the space of a year, more than 100 Democratic members of parliament appeared on his YouTube channel. Kim's political clout has earned him nicknames like political shaman Kim Ou-Joon or the president of Chungjeong-ro, which is where his studio is located.
So Kim Ou-Joon emerged as a progressive spokesperson with the image of rebel who fights against the conservative media. I do think he played a role, an influential role, in diversifying the forms of media outside the legacy media with like his online newspapers or podcasts, and now YouTube, which kind of shows that politics can exist outside of the traditional media and can be interactive.
저런 얘기를 하잖아요.
You hear people say things like the media should be free from partisanship. They talk about journalism's duty of fairness or its so-called ethical standards. To me, that's a 20th century concept of journalistic ethics. For example, take a story like Gaza. The cost of being non-partisan, of being neutral, is the normalization of Palestinian people being killed, isn't it?
오늘 8시 뉴스는 팔레스타인 무장 세력 하마스와 이스라엘 간 무력 충돌 소식으로 시작하겠습니다. 하루 만에 양쪽에서 4,000명이 넘는 사상자가 나왔습니다.
Neutrality is not the same as fairness.
편집이 곧 공정이 아니에요.
South Korea's media landscape is peppered with the likes of Kim Ou-Joon. He is one of the most influential voices, but he does have competition. In the progressive YouTube space, there are Mabel Show and Voice of Seoul. Amongst right-wing influencers are political scientist Ko Sung-kook and history lecturer turned political activist John Han-gil. Together with many others, these voices have created a cacophony that they say is a response to a compromised mainstream media. Observers of the country's politics, however, say the YouTube influencers are part of a, quote, democratic regression from below.
It is quite important for South Korea that credible journalism returns stronger than before. But the question is, where is this robust journalism really going to come from? At the moment, certainly a lot of people have lost their faith in mainstream media who are more focused on maintaining their access to those in power and often indulge in self-censorship. At the same time, there are a lot of newer media outlets, news influencers as well, who essentially seem more focused on catering to their bases, delivering opinions rather than facts, rather than credible journalism. So people like Kim Ou-Joon have fundamentally reshaped the media environment in South Korea. But have they resolved the conundrum of political polarization and the lack of factual information? Not really.
And finally, Israel's high-tech surveillance systems infiltrate almost every aspect of life in Palestine. The CCTV cameras at checkpoints, the drones watching from above, the monitoring of phones and location data. The people of Gaza know that they are constantly being tracked. And the scale of the surveillance keeps growing. Mohammed Ar-Mahwish, a journalist and writer from Gaza, has documented just how deeply surveillance shapes daily life on the Strip. New York Magazine has just published a long read by Mahwish, Watched, Tracked, and Targeted: Life in Gaza Under Israel's All-Encompassing Surveillance Regime. It is worth taking in. It describes how surveillance has forced Palestinians to adapt, changing how they speak, where they go, what they carry in public, even their behavior inside their own homes. The Israelis are still rolling out new forms of this technology, and while they're being tested on Palestinians, there is no reason to believe that that's where this will end. This kind of technology can travel, and one day it may be coming for you.